In a previous video, I showed how you could access the peer responses in PeerMark to see what your classmates said about your different papers. What I'd like to do now is show you a couple of other things that you can get out of the draft space. Your instructor comments, the rubrics the instructor uses to grade the drafts, and the originality report. So I'm going to go in here as a student myself into a space that I created for this purpose and click on the draft assignment. I'm going to review it, and that will bring up the paper that I submitted as a student into this space that the instructor graded. So I come in here and I see this. Now the first thing to understand about this space is that until you click on one of these three things up here at the top, the originality, the Grademark, or the PeerMark, nothing is really going to show up. There's no PeerMark responses for this, so it doesn't even go green for you, but if I had submitted it for peer responses, that's where you would do that and do the stuff that's in my other video. But right now what I want to do is look at Grademark. Grademark is the place where your instructor is leaving comments on your drafts and feedback of different kinds. On the paper itself, you will see little sort of text boxes here that the instructor might type something in to point out a particular place you need to look more carefully, and you can hover over those to see what the instructor said about those. That's pretty easy. The most extensive comment, at least when I grade, is going to be over in the text comment. So anything that I saw as a particular problem, or maybe a way that you could revise the next draft, different directions you could take, particular common errors that I see that are consistent, that's going to be over here in this area, and I would expect you to read that and use that for your as feedback. The last thing, if you scroll down to the bottom here, you see if you want to look at the text stuff, you can click on this. If you want to look at what pages comments are on, I don't know why you would, this is pretty short, but you can see how many comments were left on each page, and you can click on them and see them if you want to, or you can just scroll through the paper and hover over them. That's probably easier. The last piece, the boxes here, this is the rubric. The rubric tells you what you got for each of the dimensions of the rubric, and probably what you want to look at, especially for the final papers, which is a different rubric entirely. Click on this thing at the bottom that says View Full-Size Rubric in a New Window. If you do that, it will open up a rubric for you, and you can see all the different things you could have gotten, and then also see where you fell. For this one, I just graded it. I got full-time credit for being on time. I had some formatting errors. Obviously, it's not double-spaced. And then I also didn't put in a writer's memo. And so that got me from 100 to a 63, as you see there. And then you can just close this. So that's the Grademark stuff. The last thing I want to show you is the originality report. If I click on that, what it's going to show me is anything that is matching either in student papers, in the database, or somewhere out on the web. Now, this particular document that I put in here was something that I did in a face-to-face class to show some MLA citation common problems. So what I did for this particular worksheet was I pulled some original text from Questia, and I gave the students that big paragraph to read. I put down the MLA entry for that so that they could see what that would look like in a works cited page. And then I gave some different examples of how a student might be trying to use this stuff up here to be in their paper somehow, and some of the different problems that they had. The way to read these basically is to click, if you see anything that is flagged, like this obviously all came from Questia, but if I go down here to the things that were from student kind of papers, these are common problems that I see. In the first one, if I click on it, it will bring up for me kind of above, like here's what I just clicked on, it'll show me how it lines up. And what you can see here is that according to John Albarth, the 1989 film Eric the Viking provides the most thoughtful commentary to date about many aspects of Viking culture. And you can see that I haven't spelled Eric right, first of all, or it would have flagged even more, that actually the quote starts here at the 1989 film, but my quotation marks start here at provides. So that's one problem, where you have things that are verbatim that you're kind of using that you're really borrowing from the source itself and how it set up a quote. In the second one, I've got in film and history, John Albarth quotes that, and then I've got something that's flagging here. And there's several things that are going on here. You can see that this is verbatim from the source again, and it's kind of that same piece that we just looked at. It just went a little bit further. All of this is verbatim, so that's fine. The problem here really is that it says in film and history, John Albarth. And then also the quotes thing. You never use the word quotes in academic writing. You'd use something like he says or he observes, some other verb of saying. You're actually quoting John Albarth here in your paper. So let me get rid of this for a second. And the other thing is just if you go back up to the entry itself, you notice that film and history is the thing that this article was printed in. Probably some kind of a periodical or a journal. It's be the same thing as saying in the Washington Post, John Albarth says. Well, there's a million articles in the Washington Post, so you want to actually cite, if you're going to cite the title of something, do it from the title and not the publication. That's the point of that particular one. There are a couple of others here, but I want to actually switch to the next page where there are a couple of different things from different original texts. One of them here, you notice there's a 6. If I scroll down, it's harder to do on my laptop, you can see that number 6 is something that was submitted to some school. All of these that say submitted to, those are something that were submitted to a school. But it's flagging here. So I apparently wrote the same thing in my paper that someone did in another school. And if you click on it, you're not going to be able to see anything because you can't see another student's paper. However, the fact that it flags and the fact that I have the original text up here in front of me tells me a couple of things. It tells me that probably this student plagiarized from exactly the same place I did. If we have wording that is so similar that it flags like this, you definitely want to look at that. In this case, if you look carefully, and I won't do it now with you, but basically, the person is quoting and is trying to express this as if the Department of Transportation said these things. In reality, the original source says the United States Department of Transportation notes that cell phones are involved in 1.6 million auto crashes each year that cause 500,000 injuries and take 6,000 lives. That's from this original source by Daryl Dino. He's not really quoting the Department of Transportation, he's just paraphrasing where he saw this information. This person is kind of trying to say it as if it's quoted, and in fact put some things in quotation marks, but it's really not. They need to be citing Dino as the actual source because that's where it came from. The bottom one is kind of the same sort of thing, except here the person is quoting this report from the National Climate Assessment. And so there are quotation marks within this section that was part of the original text. The problem here is that, notice the same thing that's flagging here. The most frightening point is that climate change, and then they quote, right? Down here, according to this report, the most frightening point is that climate change, quote. All this stuff right here is verbatim from the setup of this particular article. That's why it needs to move those quotation marks back. And then if you want to quote this as well, you could use single quotes for that. And that's why you would use quoted in this particular article. Climate change is Church's #1 pro-life issue that came from this particular thing. Anyway, that's what's going on with these. And basically the way that you read any of these when you're looking at them is see what flags, click on it, and compare what you see up here to what you've actually written. And, move quotation marks if you need to. Anything that is verbatim from a text has to be in quotation marks. Even if you try to cite it, but you're saying, these are my words. I put this into my own paraphrase or summary. If it's verbatim, it's not your own paraphrase or summary. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. As always, the tutors and the librarians love to help students with this. So please reach out if you're having trouble getting this to work. But this should at least give you some information about how to get started cleaning up citation errors, especially if they get flagged in a paper. I hope this has been helpful, and thank you very much for your attention.